Take me home, or you're fired.
The first thing Miles Carter noticed was the tremor. Not the bass vibrating through the floor, not the clink of ice in expensive glasses, not the laugh that cut through the crowded Manhattan bar like a knife. It was the tremor in her hand. Cold fingers snapping around his wrist, tight enough to make his pulse jump. Evelyn Sinclair didn't grab people. She didn't need to. She ran rooms with a glance. She ended meetings with a pause. She could ruin a man's career without raising her voice. But tonight, in the crowded glow of the Sable Room, she latched onto Miles like he was a railing on a burning staircase. She leaned in so close he could smell her perfume, something dark and clean, like cedar and winter. And she whispered, voice sharp with panic dressed as power, "Take me home, or you're fired." It would have sounded like a game to anyone else, a CEO flexing on her executive assistant, a rich woman collecting obedience like jewelry. But Miles felt the truth in her grip. Her fingers were shaking. Her breath came too fast, too shallow, like she'd been running even while standing still. And then he followed her gaze. Across the bar, half hidden behind a pillar and a curtain of shadow, stood a man in a tailored suit that fit him like a threat. He wasn't watching the crowd. He was watching her. A slow smile touched his mouth, as if he'd just found a door she thought was locked. Miles didn't know him yet. But something deep in Miles's instincts, something sharpened by years of being responsible for a little girl's safety, recognized the posture of a predator. Evelyn's nails dug into Miles's skin. "Please," she breathed, the word barely audible, barely allowed to exist. And in that second, Miles understood. This wasn't a power play. This was a woman who had learned to survive by never letting anyone see her bleed. And tonight, she was bleeding anyway. Miles tightened his jaw. "Okay," he said quietly. "I've got you." Evelyn blinked at him, like she didn't believe kindness was real, like she expected him to flinch. Across the room, the man took one step forward. Miles stepped between them without thinking. And the night shifted. Because the moment Miles decided to protect her, he didn't just step into Evelyn Sinclair's world. He stepped into her past. To understand why Evelyn Sinclair, New York's most untouchable CEO, needed a shield in a crowded bar, we have to go back a few weeks, to a morning in Brooklyn when Miles Carter's life was already balanced on the edge of losing everything. The morning started the way most of Miles's mornings did, with a small voice and a deadline. "Dad," Ava called from her bedroom, half sing-song and half warning, "you said we'd be early today." Miles checked the time and felt his stomach tighten. He was already cutting it close. He moved through their apartment in Fort Greene like a man trained by necessity. Coffee brewing, toast popping, backpack zipped, hairbrush located like it was a life-saving device. Ava stood in her doorway in mismatched socks and a school uniform that somehow always looked like it had fought a battle overnight. Her eyes were bright, curious, unbothered by the weight Miles carried for both of them. "Okay," Miles said, forcing a smile. "We're early in spirit." Ava narrowed her eyes. "That's not a thing." Miles crouched to fix her collar. "It's a thing if we say it's a thing." She let him, then reached up and touched the faint line on his wrist, an old scar from an accident long before she was born. "Does it still hurt?" she asked. Miles paused. The question was innocent, but it hit him anyway. "Some things hurt whether you admitted it or not." "Nah," he lied gently. "Not anymore." Ava nodded like she accepted the answer, then pulled her backpack straps on like armor. Miles watched her for a heartbeat too long, because every day he looked at her, he remembered the same truth. He couldn't fail. Not at work, not as a father, not as a man trying to hold a life together with two hands and no room for mistakes. As they left the building, rain misted the street, New York's constant mood. Ava jumped over a puddle and laughed. Miles checked his phone. No new emails, no emergencies. For one brief moment, he let himself breathe. Then the screen lit up again. "Unknown number. You don't know what you're working for." Miles frowned. He stared at the message, thumb hovering. Then it vanished. Deleted, unsent, or blocked. His heart did that quiet, careful stutter it always did when a threat showed up without context. He didn't tell Ava. He never told Ava. Some fears didn't deserve a place in a child's morning. An hour later, Miles stood under the glass and steel of Hudson Yards, the city's newest monument to ambition, and reminded himself of a different truth. At Sinclair Strategies, you were only as safe as your last win. Inside the lobby, everything smelled like money and polish. Miles flashed his badge, rode the elevator up, and stepped onto a floor that looked like it belonged in a magazine. And then he saw her. Evelyn Sinclair, tall, perfect posture, immaculate suit. Her dark hair was pulled back like she had no time for softness. She was speaking to a group of executives near the conference room, and even from a distance her presence controlled the temperature of the space. Miles moved toward her with a tablet in hand. "Ms. Sinclair," he said, "your 9 o'clock move to 9:30. Legal is waiting on your signature, and you have a call from Tessa." "Cancel the call," Evelyn said without looking at him. Miles blinked. "It's from the board." "Then they'll survive disappointment," she replied. She turned then, and her eyes landed on him, gray, sharp, unreadable. "Carter," she said, the syllables clipped. "You're late." He wasn't, but he didn't correct her. "I apologize," Miles said evenly. Evelyn's gaze flicked down to his wrist for half a second, like she'd noticed the old scar. Then her eyes snapped away as if acknowledging vulnerability was a mistake. "Don't apologize," she said. "Fix it." And that was Evelyn Sinclair in a sentence. Miles nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." As she walked away, her heels clicked like punctuation. Miles exhaled slowly. He'd worked for difficult people before, but Evelyn was something else. She wasn't cruel in the way some rich executives were cruel. She didn't insult people for sport. She didn't scream. She just erased you. If you failed, you disappeared from her world like you'd never existed. Miles had seen it happen, and he couldn't afford to be next, because there was a little girl in Brooklyn who believed her dad could do anything. And Miles had built his life on never letting that belief crack. Over the next few weeks, Miles learned Evelyn's rhythms. She didn't eat lunch. She didn't smile unless someone earned it. She didn't speak about her personal life. No photos on her desk, no family stories, no warm edges. The office called her the Ice Queen, half joking, half afraid. Miles didn't call her anything. He just worked. And quietly, in the spaces between meetings, he started noticing details. How Evelyn flinched when someone came up behind her too quickly. How she kept her office door open, not because she trusted people, but because closed doors gave someone else control. How she wore long sleeves even on warm days. How her phone sometimes lit up with messages and she'd go completely still, like a statue hearing footsteps in the dark. Once he saw her hands shake as she poured coffee. She noticed him noticing. Her eyes snapped up, cold. "Do you have something to say, Carter?" Miles held her gaze, calm, respectful. "No, ma'am." A beat. Then she steadied her hands with sheer force and walked away. But later, as Miles passed her office, he heard something rare. Not words, not a call, not a meeting, just silence. A heavy silence, the kind of silence that sounds like someone holding their breath for years. Then, one afternoon, Ava's school called. Miles stepped into an empty hallway and answered fast. "Mr. Carter," the receptionist said, "Ava's fine. She wants you." Miles's stomach tightened. "Is she hurt?" No, she had a moment. She's anxious." Miles pressed his forehead to the wall. He couldn't leave. Not today. Evelyn had a board presentation in 20 minutes. He was the only one who knew where every document was. But then he pictured Ava's face when she tried to be brave and failed, and something in him snapped into clarity. He walked straight into Evelyn's office. She was standing by the window, the city stretched behind her like a kingdom. "Ms. Sinclair," Miles said, "I need to step out for 1 hour." Evelyn didn't turn. "No." Miles swallowed, but he didn't back down. "My daughter's school called. She's having an anxiety episode." Evelyn's shoulders stiffened, a long pause. Then she spoke, still facing the window. "How old?" 8. Another pause. Miles watched her reflection in the glass. For a flicker of a second, her expression changed. Not softer, not warm, just touched by something old. "Go," Evelyn said quietly. 1 hour. Miles blinked. "Thank you." Evelyn finally turned. Her eyes were icy again, but her voice was low. "Carter." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't make me regret compassion." Miles nodded once. I won't. As he left, he heard her murmur, so quietly it might have been imagined. Neither did I. Miles found Ava in the nurse's office, sitting small on a plastic chair, clutching her backpack like it was a life jacket. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, then filled with tears like she'd been holding them back until she was safe enough to let go. Miles knelt in front of her. "Hey," he said softly. "Talk to me." Ava sniffed. "I thought you wouldn't come." Miles's chest tightened. "I will always come." She studied him like she needed to be sure. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. A small, quiet gesture. A child's way of anchoring herself. Miles closed his eyes for a second. "Breathe with me," he whispered. They breathed together. In, out, and Ava's shoulders slowly lowered from around her ears. When she calmed down, Miles signed her out and took her home, letting the guilt gnaw at him the whole way. Guilt about missing work, guilt about needing work, guilt about being the only adult in her world. That night, after Ava fell asleep, Miles checked his phone again. Another message from unknown number. She doesn't forgive men who leave. Miles stared at it. His thumb hovered over a callback, but something in his gut told him it wouldn't matter. He blocked the number. The message stayed in his head anyway. Back at Sinclair Strategies, Evelyn's eyes tracked Miles when he returned, not angry, assessing. "You're back," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Did she calm down?" Miles hesitated. He didn't owe Evelyn details. But something in her tone, it wasn't curiosity. It was something close to understanding, wearing a mask. "Yes," he said. "She did." Evelyn looked away too quickly. "Good," she said. "Don't let your personal life make you sloppy." And there it was. The armor again. Miles nodded. Understood. But as he walked out, he caught a glimpse of her hand gripping the edge of her desk, knuckles pale. Like she was gripping something else with it, something invisible, something heavy. In the days that followed, the strange connections grew. Evelyn began giving Miles tasks that weren't in his job description. Not cruel tasks, not errands, just proximity. "Walk with me," she'd say, and he'd follow her down silent hallways. "Sit," she'd tell him during late-night work sessions, and he'd stay. Once, she handed him a file without looking up. "Read that," she said. Miles glanced at the cover. Domestic Violence Advocacy Partnership Proposal. He frowned. "This is new." Evelyn's pen paused. "Is it?" He looked up. Her eyes were on him, daring him to say the thing out loud. Miles chose his words carefully. "No," he said slowly. "It's not." Evelyn's gaze held his for a beat too long. Then she looked down again. "Draft an implementation plan," she said, "and keep it off PR's radar." Miles nodded. "Yes, ma'am." As he left, he felt it clearly. Evelyn Sinclair didn't do kindness publicly. She did it privately, like she was paying a debt to someone she used to be. Then came the invitation. A high-profile networking event at the Sable Room. A necessary appearance. Evelyn hated those nights. Miles could tell, even if she never said it. He saw the way she tightened before walking into crowds, the way she scanned rooms like she expected danger to be wearing a smile. He thought, maybe she just hated losing control. He didn't know the truth yet. He didn't know that Evelyn's past had a name, and that name was about to walk into the bar like a gunman entering a church. The Sable Room was all velvet shadows and golden light, the kind of place where people came to pretend they were safe. Miles kept close behind Evelyn, his eyes moving through the crowd. He wasn't security, he wasn't a bodyguard, but being a black man raising a daughter in New York taught you to read danger fast. Evelyn moved like she belonged, chin lifted, shoulders squared, smile measured, a performance polished enough to blind people. They greeted investors, shook hands, traded compliments sharp enough to cut. Miles carried Evelyn's phone, checked messages, kept time. Everything was almost normal. Almost. Then Evelyn froze. It was subtle, a hitch in her step, a tightening around her eyes. Miles leaned in. "Ms. Sinclair?" Evelyn didn't answer. Her gaze was locked on a corner of the bar. Miles followed her stare and saw him. A man in a charcoal suit, hair dark and neatly styled, leaning casually as if he'd always been there. His eyes were bright with amusement, and when Evelyn met his gaze, he smiled slowly, like a lock clicking shut. Evelyn's breath caught. Miles noticed her hand twitch near her sleeve, as if her body remembered pain before her mind caught up. Then she moved. Fast. She reached for Miles and grabbed his wrist, hard, her nails dug in, her lips brushed his ear. "Take me home," she hissed, "or you're fired." Miles didn't move right away, because he felt it, the fear, the desperation wrapped in command. He whispered, "Who is that?" Evelyn's voice cracked. "Don't." Miles turned slightly, blocking her line of sight. "Evelyn," he said quietly, not calling her ma'am for the first time. "Tell me." Her grip tightened. "He's my ex-husband," she breathed. "Tristan." Miles's jaw clenched. Tristan Vane. The name landed heavy, like a door slamming. Miles looked across the room again. Tristan lifted his glass in a small toast. Then he mouthed something. Miles couldn't hear it, but he could read lips. "Come here." Evelyn's face went pale. Her eyes flicked toward the exit, then back to Tristan, like a trapped animal calculating whether the jump would kill her. Miles made a decision. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of decision fathers make without ceremony. He turned to Evelyn. "Okay," he said. "We're leaving." Evelyn blinked. "Miles." "I'm not asking," he said softly. He guided her through the crowd, one hand firm at her elbow, the other holding his phone like a weapon. People tried to stop them. A board member called her name. A donor reached for her. Miles smiled politely and kept moving. "Ms. Sinclair has a conflict," he said, voice calm. "We'll follow up." Evelyn's heels clicked too fast. Her breathing grew shallow. As they neared the back exit, Tristan's voice cut through the music, smooth, amused. "Leaving so soon, Evelyn?" Miles didn't turn. He pushed the door open. Cold rain hit them like reality. Evelyn shuddered. Miles stepped in front of her as Tristan's footsteps approached. "Evelyn," Tristan said, close now, "you look beautiful when you're afraid." Miles turned then. He met Tristan's eyes, and he didn't look away. Tristan's smile widened. "And you must be the help." Miles's voice was steady. "She's leaving." Tristan's gaze slid over Miles like he was measuring him, judging him. "Do you know who you're standing between?" Tristan asked softly. Miles didn't flinch. "A woman who wants to go home and a man who needs to let her." Tristan chuckled. "Cute." Evelyn's hand clutched Miles' sleeve. Tristan's eyes flicked to it. "Oh," he murmured. "So she found a shield." Miles felt Evelyn trembling behind him, and something in him went cold. Tristan took one step closer. "Evelyn," he said, voice lowering, "we'll talk soon." Evelyn's voice came out thin. "No." Tristan tilted his head. "Yes, because you don't get to walk away from me." Miles lifted his phone. "I'm calling security." Tristan smiled like that was funny. "Do it," he said. "I'd love for everyone here to see you panic." Miles recognized the trap. Tristan didn't want violence. He wanted spectacle. He wanted Evelyn humiliated, controlled. Miles leaned slightly toward Evelyn without looking away from Tristan. "Can you walk?" he murmured. Evelyn nodded once, eyes glossy. Miles opened his rideshare app with his thumb, never breaking eye contact. A car was 2 minutes away. Tristan's gaze flicked to Miles's phone. "Who are you?" Tristan asked, voice turning sharper beneath the charm. Miles answered honestly, "I'm the person she asked for help." Tristan's smile vanished. For the first time, something ugly flashed across his face. Rage barely contained. "You don't touch what's mine," Tristan hissed. Miles stepped forward so Tristan couldn't see Evelyn anymore. "She's not yours," Miles said quietly. Tristan's eyes narrowed. "You're going to regret that." Miles didn't answer. The car pulled up. Miles guided Evelyn into the back seat, shielding her from Tristan's line of sight. As he slid in beside her, he caught one last look at Tristan standing in the rain like a curse. Tristan lifted 2 fingers to his lips, then pointed at Evelyn, a silent threat. Then the car moved, and Evelyn's breath finally broke, like a dam cracking. She folded toward Miles, not touching him, just existing close enough to borrow safety. Miles stared out the window at the neon blurring in the rain. His wrist still ached where Evelyn had grabbed him. Not from pain, from the truth of it. Someone had taught this woman that survival was something you had to claw for. And Miles Carter, single father, fixer, man with you and into too much to lose, had just made himself her shield. Evelyn's apartment on the Upper West Side looked like a life built for magazines. High ceilings, clean lines, expensive art that didn't feel personal. But when the door shut behind them, Evelyn sagged against it like she'd been holding herself upright with pure will. Miles stayed near the entrance, careful not to invade. "Do you want me to call someone?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head quickly. "No." Her voice was harsh, like she hated that it sounded weak. Miles nodded. "Okay." Silence. Rain tapped against the windows. Evelyn's arms wrapped around herself. Then, in a voice that barely held together, she said, "He wasn't supposed to find me." Miles's chest tightened. "How long has he been around?" he asked. Evelyn's laugh was short and humorless. "Always." She turned her face away. Miles watched her shoulders rise and fall like she was fighting a war in her lungs. "Evelyn," he said gently, "what did he do?" Her eyes snapped to his. For a second, Miles thought she would cut him down with words, but she didn't, because her strength was exhausted, and truth was pressing up inside her like blood behind teeth. "He didn't hit me at first," she said. "Not in the way people imagine." Miles stayed still, listening. "He edited my world," she continued, voice trembling. "He decided who I could talk to, what I could wear, what I could say. He made me apologize for things I didn't do. He made me think I was lucky he tolerated me." Miles's jaw tightened. Evelyn swallowed hard. "And when I tried to leave," her voice broke, "he made sure I understood I couldn't." Miles felt his fists clench. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked softly. Evelyn's eyes flashed. "Because no one believes a woman like me can be a victim." The words landed heavy. Evelyn Sinclair, CEO, billionaire circles, steel spine. Victim didn't fit the story people wanted, and Tristan knew it. Miles nodded slowly. "I believe you." Evelyn stared at him like she didn't know what to do with belief. Then her phone lit up. Unknown number. Evelyn flinched so hard she almost dropped it. Miles stepped closer. "What is it?" Evelyn's fingers shook as she turned the screen toward him. "A message. You can hide behind employees all you want. I'll still own you." Miles's blood went cold. "He's using unknown numbers," Miles said, thinking fast. "We can document this." Evelyn's voice turned sharp with panic. "Documentation won't stop him." Miles met her eyes. "No, but it can end him." Evelyn's breath hitched. Miles spoke carefully. "Do you have a lawyer outside the company?" Evelyn shook her head. "I don't trust anyone." Miles nodded once. "Then we start with someone you can't intimidate." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Miles thought of the one person in the building who never smiled at power. "Priya Desai," he said. "Legal counsel. She doesn't scare easy." Evelyn looked away, swallowing hard. Then, quietly, "He said he'd ruin me." Miles's voice was low. "He's already trying." Evelyn's eyes sharpened. "What do you mean?" Miles took a breath. "You left the event early. People saw you. The board is going to ask questions." Evelyn's face tightened with dread. Miles continued. "Tristan didn't show up for closure. He showed up to remind you he can still pull your strings." Evelyn's jaw clenched. "I won't let him." Miles believed she meant it, but he also saw the cracks. Trauma didn't disappear because you were intelligent. Fear didn't leave because you were powerful. Sometimes fear stayed precisely because you were powerful, because you had more to lose. Miles glanced at his phone. A new email notification appeared. Subject line, confidential. Sinclair Strategies Board. His stomach dropped. He opened it. A forwarded link from a gossip site. Headline, Sinclair Strategies. CEO stumbles out of Soho event. Is Evelyn Sinclair hiding something? Below it, blurry photos. Evelyn at the back exit. Evelyn in the car. Evelyn's face pale. Miles's face visible beside her. Evelyn inhaled sharply when she saw it. Miles felt rage crawl up his spine. Tristan wasn't just following her, he was building a narrative, a story where Evelyn was unstable, a story that could destroy her credibility, her company, everything she'd built as armor. Evelyn's voice went flat. He hired someone to photograph me. Miles nodded. Yes. Evelyn's eyes glistened with something that looked like shame. Miles hated that. Look at me, he said gently. Evelyn didn't. Miles stepped closer, careful, respectful. Evelyn, he said, you did nothing wrong tonight. Her lips pressed together. You left, she whispered. I ran. Miles shook his head. You survived. Evelyn's eyes flicked to his. For a second, the Ice Queen mask slipped, and Miles saw the woman beneath, exhausted, cornered, still trying to stand. Miles spoke quietly, like he was talking to Ava in the nurse's office. Breathe with me, he said. Evelyn stared. Then slowly, almost angrily, she inhaled. Miles inhaled too. Out, in, out. Evelyn's shoulders loosened by a fraction. Miles nodded. Good. Evelyn's voice came out tight. Don't do that. Do what? Be kind, she snapped, then swallowed. It complicates things. Miles held her gaze. I'm not doing it to complicate, he said. I'm doing it because you deserve it. Evelyn's eyes shimmered like she might cry. She didn't. She turned away, but her voice, when it came, was quieter. He'll come back, she said. Miles nodded. Then we're ready. The next morning, Priya Desai listened to Evelyn's story without blinking. She didn't gasp. She didn't pity. She didn't soften her voice like Evelyn was fragile. She simply asked questions, precise and sharp. Do you have any written threats? Priya asked. Evelyn hesitated. Miles slid his phone forward. We do. Priya's eyes flicked to him. Evelyn's jaw tightened. He's been messaging me. Priya nodded slowly. Good, that's a start. Evelyn scoffed. A start? Like this is an ordinary business dispute. Priya's gaze didn't waver. It's not ordinary, but it is solvable. Evelyn's hands clenched. You don't know him. Priya's voice stayed calm. No, but I know patterns. Priya looked at Miles. And I know the person who escalates is often the person losing control. Miles felt Evelyn stiffen beside him. Priya continued. We document everything. We file for a restraining order if we can. We prepare for a smear campaign. Evelyn's laugh was bitter. Prepare? He's already started. Priya nodded. Then we counter. Not with emotion. She glanced at Evelyn. With evidence. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. And if evidence isn't enough? Priya leaned forward. Then, she said, we burn his credibility to the ground. Silence. Miles felt something shift in Evelyn. Not relief, not safety, but a spark. The first ember of fighting back. Tristan escalated anyway, because predators don't retreat quietly. They punish. Within a week, more stories appeared. Anonymous sources claiming Evelyn was unstable. A leaked audio clip that sounded like her voice slurring words. A rumor she'd been hospitalized. Then, one afternoon, Miles got a call from an unknown number. He answered cautiously. A smooth male voice said, Miles Carter? Miles froze. Yes? You're a devoted father, the voice said pleasantly. That's admirable. Miles's throat tightened. Who is this? A chuckle. You already know. Miles's pulse hammered. Tristan Vane. Tristan's voice was silky, dangerous. How's Ava? Tristan asked. Miles went cold. What did you say? Miles hissed, stepping into an empty stairwell. Tristan sighed like Miles was being difficult. I said, how is your daughter? Ava, right? 8 years old, bright eyes. Cute little laugh. Miles's vision sharpened with rage. Don't say her name, Miles snarled. Tristan hummed. Protective, of course you are. Miles's grip tightened on the phone. If you come near her... Tristan cut him off, voice suddenly sharp. If you keep standing near Evelyn, you'll learn what it feels like to lose something you love. Miles's breath came fast. You think you're her hero, Tristan murmured, but you're just convenient. Miles swallowed hard. What do you want? Tristan's voice softened again, like honey over glass. I want Evelyn back where she belongs, he said. Quiet, grateful, obedient. Miles's stomach churned. And if she doesn't, I'll take everything she built, and maybe, Tristan added lightly, I'll take yours too. The line clicked dead. Miles stood in the stairwell, shaking, not from fear for himself, from fear for Ava, from rage that Tristan had touched her life with words alone. Miles closed his eyes. Then he did what he always did when panic tried to swallow him. He chose action. He walked back into the office, found Evelyn, and said, voice tight, he called me. Evelyn's face drained of color. He mentioned Ava, Miles added. Evelyn's eyes flashed with something raw and furious, and for the first time, her cold mask didn't just crack, it shattered. I will kill him, she whispered. Miles shook his head, voice low. No. Evelyn's jaw clenched. He doesn't get to touch your child. Miles stepped closer. He's trying to make us reckless, Miles said. We don't give him that. Evelyn stared at him like she was trying to remember how to breathe. Miles spoke slowly. We end him the clean way, he said. The way that lasts. And Evelyn's lips parted, then quietly. How? Miles met her gaze. We tell the truth, he said, before he can invent it. Evelyn's eyes widened, fear and defiance colliding. No, she whispered. If I do that, you lose the perfect image, Miles said softly. Yeah. Evelyn's breath trembled. Miles's voice lowered, steady as a heartbeat. But you gain yourself back. Silence. Evelyn looked away, eyes burning. Then she whispered something that sounded like confession. I don't know who I am without that image. Miles felt it, the wound, the way she'd built a fortress because the world didn't forgive broken women, especially not powerful ones. Miles thought of Ava in the nurse's office. He thought of how children didn't care about perfect, they cared about safe. He said gently, then we find out. The night before this press conference, Evelyn didn't go home. She stayed in her office, lights dim, city glittering outside like 1,000 watching eyes. Miles sat across from her at the conference table, folders spread out, threats, timestamps, call logs, security footage. Priya stood at the head of the table, calm and ruthless. This is what we have, Priya said, and this is what we're going to do. Evelyn stared at the documents like they were teeth. Miles watched her hands. They were still, too still, like she was holding herself in place with force. Dr. Lena Park arrived quietly, invited by Priya and approved by Evelyn with reluctance. Lena sat beside Evelyn and spoke softly. You don't have to perform strength in here, Lena said. Evelyn's laugh was thin. I don't know how not to, Lena nodded. Then tonight we practice. Evelyn's throat worked. Miles felt something tighten in his chest. He wanted to reach out, but he didn't. He knew what unwanted touch could do to someone with Evelyn's history, so he stayed present in the way that mattered, steady, available, not demanding anything. Priya clicked to the next slide on her laptop. Tristan's campaign hinges on one thing, Priya said. Silence. If you stay silent, he fills the space. Evelyn's eyes flicked up. And if I speak? Priya's tone didn't soften. Then you control the narrative. Evelyn's jaw clenched. By admitting I was weak. Lena leaned in slightly. You weren't weak, Lena said. You were trapped. Evelyn's eyes flashed with anger. That's just a nicer word. Miles spoke quietly, surprising himself. No, he said. It's an accurate one. Evelyn turned to him sharply. Miles held her gaze. I've seen weakness, Miles said, voice calm. It looks like a man who needs to hurt people to feel big. Evelyn's breath caught. Miles continued, careful and steady. Survival isn't weakness, he said. It's proof you kept going. Silence settled. Evelyn looked down, lips pressed tight as if keeping emotion from spilling. Priya cleared her throat. We go public tomorrow, she said, We do it clean. We do it fast. We do it with receipts. Evelyn swallowed. And if he retaliates? Priya's eyes were cold. He will. Miles's phone buzzed. Another unknown number. He didn't answer, but the message came through anyway. You think the truth will save you? I'll make sure it buries you. Miles showed Evelyn. Evelyn stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered, barely audible, I'm still afraid. Miles nodded. I know. Evelyn's eyes lifted to his. Why are you doing this? Miles hesitated. Because the real answer wasn't professional. It wasn't about loyalty to the company. It was about a woman who had been cornered and told she deserved it. It was about a child in Brooklyn who deserved a world where predators didn't win. Miles answered honestly, voice low. Because I have a daughter, he said. And I want her to grow up believing men like him don't get to write the ending. Evelyn's eyes shimmered. For a second she looked like she might reach for him. She didn't. But her voice softened, the ice thinning. Thank you, she said. Miles nodded once. Get some sleep. Evelyn laughed without humor. Right. Miles stood to leave, then paused. He looked at her, really looked, and he said the one thing he wished someone had said to him when he first became a single father and thought he had to be unbreakable. You don't have to be perfect to be safe, he murmured. Evelyn's throat tightened. Miles turned and walked out before she could see what that sentence cost him to say. The next morning, the lobby of Sinclair Strategies filled with cameras. Reporters lined up like wolves behind microphones. Security stood stiff. The air smelled like electricity. Miles stood off to the side, scanning faces, watching for Tristan. Evelyn waited behind the glass doors of the conference room. Her suit was flawless, her hair perfect, her expression controlled. But Miles saw it, her fingers tapping her thigh, barely noticeable. A nervous tick, a crack in the armor. Priya approached Evelyn. Ready? Evelyn didn't answer right away. She looked at Miles. Miles met her gaze and gave her a small nod. Not a command, not encouragement like a cheerleader, just a quiet message. You are not alone. Evelyn inhaled. Then she stepped forward. The doors opened. Flashbulbs exploded. Evelyn walked to the podium like she was walking into a storm she'd decided to face. Her eyes swept the room. And for one heartbeat, fear flickered across her face. Then she spoke. My name is Evelyn Sinclair, she said, voice clear. And today, I'm going to tell you the truth. The room went still. Evelyn continued. For years, I maintained a public image of perfection, she said, because I believed it was necessary for survival in my industry. Her fingers tightened slightly on the edges of the podium. Miles watched her breathe. In the past, Evelyn said, I was married to Tristan Vane. A murmur rippled through the reporters. Evelyn's eyes didn't flinch. That marriage was abusive, she said simply. Not always with bruises, often with control. A reporter shouted, Can you clarify? Evelyn lifted a hand. No, she said. You don't get to interrogate my pain for entertainment. The room quieted. Evelyn's voice strengthened. He isolated me. He threatened me. He manipulated my professional relationships and attempted to destroy my credibility when I left. Evelyn paused. The silence was thick. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. I stayed silent because I thought silence would protect me. Her eyes sharpened. I was wrong. Miles felt his chest tighten. Evelyn reached down and lifted a folder. Priya had prepared it. Evelyn opened it and held up printed screenshots. These are messages, Evelyn said. Recent threats, time-stamped, verified. She placed them down like evidence in a courtroom. And these, she continued, are surveillance images from the Sable Room on the night Tristan Vane approached me. Cameras clicked wildly. Reporters leaned forward. Evelyn's chin lifted. And this, she said, voice like steel, is my statement. I will no longer allow my abuser to control the story. A shout from the back. Are you accusing Tristan Vane of a crime? Evelyn's gaze cut through the room. I'm stating facts, she said, and my legal team will handle the rest. Priya stepped forward beside the podium. We have filed for protective orders, Priya said. We have submitted evidence to the appropriate authorities. Any further harassment will be treated accordingly." The room erupted into questions. Miles scanned the crowd again. Then he saw it. A movement near the side entrance. A tall man in a charcoal suit pushing past security with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tristan. He walked like he owned the building, like the rules were a costume he wore when he felt like it. Miles's blood went cold. Tristan spoke loudly, his voice slicing through the chaos. "Evelyn." The room fell quiet, instinctively hungry. Evelyn's face went white. Tristan stepped closer, hands open like he was the injured party. "This is what you've become?" Tristan asked, voice sweet. "A liar begging for attention?" Evelyn's fingers curled on the podium. Miles moved forward, but security held him back for a second. Tristan's eyes flicked toward Miles and narrowed. Then he smiled, sharp and ugly. "Oh," Tristan said. "The shield." Tristan looked back at Evelyn. "You think they'll believe you?" he murmured. "You think they'll love you now that you're broken?" Evelyn's breath shook. For a second, the old fear flickered, reflexive, trained. And then, Evelyn lifted her eyes, and they were not afraid. They were furious. She leaned slightly toward the microphone. "I don't need them to love me," she said quietly. "I need you to stop." Tristan laughed, loud and contemptuous. "Make me." Evelyn's voice turned razor calm. "I already am," she said. Priya lifted a hand. 2 police officers stepped forward from the back, quiet, prepared. Tristan's smile faltered. "Mr. Vane," an officer said. "You need to come with us." Tristan's eyes flashed with rage. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Do you know who I am?" Miles stepped in then, moving past security, planting himself between Tristan and Evelyn. His voice was low. "I know exactly who you are," Miles said. Tristan's gaze locked onto Miles, and for a second, the charm dropped completely, revealing something raw and hateful. "You," Tristan hissed. "You think you're a hero." Miles's jaw tightened. "No," Miles said. "I think you're done." Tristan lunged forward, fast, aimed not to hit but to intimidate, to reclaim control through proximity. Miles didn't flinch. He raised his arm, blocking Tristan with the same wrist Evelyn had grabbed in the bar. The old scar on it showed like a line drawn by fate. Security moved in. The officers grabbed Tristan's arms. Tristan struggled, face twisting. "This isn't over," Tristan shouted, eyes on Evelyn. "You'll regret humiliating me." Evelyn's voice came out steady, almost quiet. "I regret letting you live in my head," she said. Tristan froze for half a second. Those words hit him harder than a slap. Then he was pulled away, still shouting, still trying to poison the air. The lobby stayed silent as he disappeared. Evelyn stood behind the podium, breathing hard, shoulders trembling. Miles turned slightly, watching her. Evelyn's hands were shaking, not from fear this time, from the release, from the spell breaking. Evelyn looked at Miles. Her eyes were wet, and for the first time, she didn't hide it. The backlash came fast. Some headlines praised her bravery. Others called it a stunt. The internet did what it always did, turned pain into debate. Evelyn read none of it. Priya filtered everything. Lena sat with Evelyn through the worst nights. And Miles kept showing up, not as a savior, as a steady presence. He drove Evelyn to court hearings. He waited outside therapy sessions. He walked her through security plans. And when he went home, he tucked Ava into bed and pretended his heart wasn't still racing from living too close to danger. One evening, Ava looked up at him while he washed dishes. "Dad," she said, "are you in trouble?" Miles froze. "Why would you think that?" Ava shrugged, small shoulders lifting. "You're quieter lately." Miles swallowed. He couldn't tell her about Tristan. Not yet. So he said the truth he could. "Sometimes grown-ups deal with hard things," he said softly. "But I'm okay." Ava studied him. Then she walked over and wrapped her arms around his waist. Miles rested his hand on the top of her head, eyes closing. He whispered, mostly to himself, "I'm okay." A month later, Evelyn made another choice. Not legal, not strategic, human. She announced a partnership between Sinclair Strategies and a domestic violence advocacy organization, openly this time, with her name attached. Reporters asked why. Evelyn stood at the podium again. Her voice was calm. "Because silence helps abusers," she said, "and I'm done helping." After the event, she stepped off stage and found Miles waiting near the side exit. Rain fell outside, soft and steady, New York's way of washing the day down the gutters. Evelyn looked at Miles and said quietly, "You were right." Miles lifted an eyebrow. "About what?" Evelyn's lips twitched, almost a smile. "If you keep hiding," she murmured, "he still owns the story." Miles nodded slowly. "And now?" Evelyn inhaled, then exhaled like she was letting go of years. "Now," she said, "I own it." They stood in silence. Then Evelyn surprised him. She reached out, slowly, carefully, and touched his wrist. Not grabbing, not clinging, just placing her fingertips on the scar like she was acknowledging how he'd held the line for her. Miles didn't pull away. Evelyn's voice softened. "I don't know what we are," she admitted, "and I don't want to make you responsible for me." Miles's chest tightened. He understood that fear, the fear of needing someone, the fear of burdening them. Miles spoke gently. "You're not a burden," he said, "but I'm not a solution either." Evelyn nodded. "Good." A beat. Then she asked, almost hesitant, "Can I meet Ava?" Miles blinked. That question wasn't casual. It wasn't flirtation. It was vulnerability with a risk attached. Miles thought of his daughter's bright eyes, his home, his sacred small world. He held Evelyn's gaze. "Only if you're ready to be real," he said. Evelyn swallowed. "I'm trying," she whispered. Miles nodded once. Then, "Yes," he said. "You can meet her." Evelyn's shoulders loosened like she'd been holding a breath for weeks, and for the first time, her smile wasn't sharp. It was small, honest, almost shy. Evelyn's first dinner in Fort Greene wasn't elegant. There were takeout containers on the table, Ava's art supplies scattered like confetti, a toy dinosaur guarding the salt shaker. Evelyn stood in the doorway looking unsure, like she'd walked into a world where she didn't know the rules. Ava looked up from the couch. Her gaze moved over Evelyn, assessing, curious. Then Ava stood and walked over. "Hi," Ava said. Evelyn hesitated, then lowered herself slightly to Ava's level. "Hi," Evelyn said softly. "I'm Evelyn." Ava tilted her head. "Are you my dad's boss?" Miles stiffened. Evelyn glanced back at him, then returned her gaze to Ava. "Yes," Evelyn said carefully, "but I'm also his friend." Ava's eyes narrowed in serious thought. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small plastic cup from a toy tea set. She held it out to Evelyn. "This is for brave people," Ava said. Evelyn froze. Miles felt his throat tighten. Evelyn slowly took the tiny cup like it mattered. Her eyes shimmered. "Thank you," Evelyn whispered. Ava nodded like the matter was settled and went back to the couch. Evelyn stayed standing for a second, holding that plastic cup as if it was something holy. Then she looked at Miles. Her voice trembled just slightly. "She doesn't even know," Evelyn whispered. Miles shook his head. "No," he said. "She just knows what bravery looks like." Evelyn blinked hard. Then she exhaled, long and shaking. And in that exhale, something old loosened. Later that night, after Ava fell asleep, Miles walked Evelyn to the door. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The apartment smelled like warm food and normal life. Evelyn paused, fingers on the doorknob. "I'm scared again," she admitted. Miles nodded. "Yeah." Evelyn glanced up. "It doesn't go away." Miles's voice was quiet. "No, but it gets smaller." Evelyn swallowed. "How?" Miles looked at her, the city's glow spilling into the hallway. "By building something that's real," he said, "so the past doesn't get to be the only thing you believe in." Evelyn's eyes softened. Then, cautiously, she stepped closer. "Can I?" Her voice caught. "Can I stay a little longer?" Miles didn't answer with words. He opened the door wider, and Evelyn stepped back into the warmth. Weeks later, on a rainy evening, Miles and Evelyn stood on a Brooklyn sidewalk under one umbrella. Ava skipped ahead, hopping over puddles. Evelyn's hand slid into Miles's, not grabbing, not clinging, just holding. Miles looked down at their joined hands and thought about the night in the bar. The wrist grab, the whispered threat, the fear, and how it had led them here, not to a perfect life, but to a true one. Evelyn looked up at him and murmured, almost smiling, "You know, I never said sorry for threatening to fire you." Miles huffed a soft laugh. "You can start now." Evelyn's eyes warmed. "I'm sorry," she said. "And thank you." Miles squeezed her hand. Ahead of them, Ava turned and waved. "Come on," she called. "You're slow." Miles and Evelyn moved forward together. Rain fell around them like a curtain. And for once, it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like cleansing. If this story touched a place in you that still remembers fear, or a place that still believes love has to be earned through pain, leave a message in the comments for Evelyn, for Miles, or for the version of you that kept going anyway. Because surviving wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning.